Well, it's always nice to intro the show on a laugh, though I can't tell you what we were laughing
What
about.
is?
What is the guy that didn't shave today? Okay. All right. So we are back on Real Boxing Talk, and I think we've gone 3 months since I've butchered that. Now I can't speak other words. But anyhow, Real Boxing Talk with John and Charles and John, and your host, Mr. Big Mouth. We're going to talk Olympic boxing today and the importance or non-importance or the significance or whatever. But we're trying to fill that void because the Olympics are coming up. And we posed a question, or we were talking to each other about, are the Olympics in boxing, are they important as they used to be, or do they really used to be that important? You know, obviously we haven't had a Olympic gold medalist from the United States in several Olympics. And we're just going to try and look through the history of Olympic boxing and pull out our favorites, maybe our favorite year, favorite team, that kind of thing. So, gentlemen, welcome.
Hello there.
All right. We started, at least my research went back as far as 1952 in Helsinki. And now that I'm on 3 different screens, I can't get my mouse to work. And the star for our way of looking at that, Floyd Patterson, who of course we know as the future heavyweight champion, but in this instance, he won Olympic gold as a middleweight, which I don't think we think about that, but that's, you know, how it works. And, of course, we see that the silver medalist of the heavyweight was Ingemar Johansson from Sweden. And we know that whole thing. So let's kind of see how that plays out. John, let's talk about the Ingemar Johansson-Floyd Patterson rivalry, if you want to call it, and how it stems from this Olympics.
Well, it started in 1959, right? That was the first fight between them, and Patterson was favored. Johansson, I should have read more about him, but he had a scandal earlier in his boxing career where I think he was considered something of a coward because he quit a fight, and he had been doing all right as a pro, but they really didn't think that he was going to amount to much, and he had the hammer of Thor, you know, the right hand. And as good as Patterson was, we were talking about off air, Frank, I don't think he's really got credit for some of his victories. You know, like knocking out Archie Moore a lot easier than Rocky Marciano had done it the year before. It was always because his chin, you know, he get knocked down by guys who couldn't punch, supposedly. But he had everything else. He was fast. He would spring out of that crouch, you know, the thing that Tyson would use. Bam! You know, he had really fast hands. He was real talented. And when he fought Johansson, it was a shocking development because he got bludgeoned. You know, he got stopped in 3. And then it was a whole reversal. After he lost, he had to put up with a lot of criticism. Patterson was a very sensitive guy. I'm sure you guys know this. And it hurt him really badly, but it also made him really determined. I don't think the man had a mean bone in his body, but he really wanted to beat Johansson the second time. And he did. Emphatically, if you've ever seen video with that, he knocks him out. He leaping left hook. And
oh, yeah.
Johansson's foot
the aftermath was scary. Yeah,
quivering like this, right? And then they fight one more time, and that one gets not much response, but write-ups. But it was back and forth. It looked like Johansson was going to stop him again because he hurt him and knocked him down, but then he knocked Johansson down, hurt him, and then he stopped Johansson again. So, you know, that rivalry was important. And the other story that popped into my head, since I have that man behind me, that certain individual, that international icon that we know, he's light heavyweight gold medalist of the 1960 games. He sparred with Ingemar Johansson, I think before he fought, right after the Olympics, before he fought Patterson the third time, and Johansson got disgusted and told him to get out of the ring because he couldn't lay a glove on him.
Wow. Right,
so,
right.
That's one of those great stories, but I just love it that Patterson started as a middleweight, Frank, and he just gained weight, and he wasn't a big guy. You know? He wasn't. It was not even 6 feet, I don't think, and he wasn't a big dude. So when he faced Sonny Liston, he was bigger and stronger and all that, and he just got overpowered. But Patterson was a hell of a fighter.
Well, and out of that Olympics, we also get, and there's always a human interest story somewhere, but the light heavyweight champion from the United States was Norvell Lee. who was one of the Tuskegee Airmen, which I didn't know. So that's one of those things that pops up and you go,
story.
oh, that's interesting. So I like to delve into that more time when we have a chance. But it's interesting to see how, as we move through the years, the I don't want to call it the importance of the Olympic boxers, but we see that that's now the training ground or becomes the training ground. So we go to 56, the lightweight heavyweight silver medalist is Jose Torres. And the Americans in 56 in Melbourne, we have 3 silver medalists, no gold, no bronze. And you're questioning whether, okay, is this important or not? And I guess that's up for everybody to say. But Charles, when we look at it, there are also any world champions coming out from the other countries as well. So what's your take on that?
Well, I think that when you look at history, history shows us that certain times or certain times when the Olympics boxing was really important because of what it delivered. We think about 76, of course, we think about 84, even you go back to 60, you know, in that one, you saw exceptional fighters coming out. And there was either a few of them or there was a large amount of fighters that you'll remember. We will never forget 76, 84, just because of the sheer numbers of greatness and guys that came out. But I think part of it too, though, is particularly back in the day, as you mentioned before with Johansson and then also Patterson, that I think boxers were doing other things, and maybe the Olympics, in my opinion, wasn't just for everybody, because the way you had to get there and what was going on, and even when you think about the country, where the country was at that time. And we think too about the Olympics. A lot of those guys, you think about Floyd Patterson. John mentioned that he was a really nice guy, but he also was a polished guy. And I think that had a lot to do with it. So, you know, you might have the toughest guy in the world that would, you come down to the Bronx, you come somewhere in the neighborhood, he would beat the hell out of you. And he might go on to be a professional. But at the same time, he may not have been Olympic boxing caliber from that standpoint. And I think that when we see these waves, because I had to tell you, I really thought that after watching 76 and 84, particularly 76, that Olympic boxing would become, as you mentioned, that training ground for our great champions. But it fell off somewhere. It fell out. So I think that kind of shows you that it kind of really depends on how it goes, who's the guys that are running it, who the trainers are and stuff like that too. What is the organization doing over to make sure that those boxers make that transition or they're getting into the program. So I think that's what it did. But I think it showed you early on that when you see those fighters, as you mentioned, back 52, and we move on forward, the ones that were there were great. Not to take anything from anybody else, but those ones were special. They weren't just like 6 guys, 7 guys, okay? They were great guys. You mentioned Floyd Patterson, Johansson, we go down the line. Those were great guys, but I just think the circumstances in the country and even in the world kind of had a lot to do with whether or not other guys, particularly in other divisions, would had opportunity or rose up to become Olympic boxers.
Is it safe to assume that a guy like a Rocky Marciano or a Tony Zale or a Ezra Charles or someone, they weren't looking to fight for free? Is it safe to assume that at this point you're fighting for pay and they're going to start paying you right away? You pay your dues. You know, you may have your first pro fight when you're 17 and it was okay to lose. So you have a record at the end of your pro career, you know, 122 and 18, and you got paid every fight. Whereas as you move along, the quote unquote amateurism isn't quite what it was, but also you have a payday waiting for you if you go through this established way of doing things. Kind of like AAU basketball. You know, you're not really getting paid, but you're not getting paid. You're an amateur, but you're not an amateur. And is it safe to assume that a Rocky Graziano had no chance of being an Olympic boxer or an amateur boxer because he needed to get paid today, not 4 years down the road? John?
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chuck. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, I real quick, and John, please jump in. I think that had a lot to do with it because if you point to somebody like the Cinderella Man, right? I mean,
Right.
you have kids at home, you're a young dad or whatever. The last thing on your mind is you're telling your wife, oh, I'm going to go be an Olympic boxer. She's going to say, how much does that pay? When you really have to go to the government and accept welfare, and what we know is welfare now or a handout, and that person's shameful that they had to do that, so shameful that when they do get money, they pay the money back. So, yeah, you really didn't have a time to go off and just gallivant, particularly if you had a family. So, yeah, I would see that as definitely one of the points to a lot of guys, again, that did not perhaps meet the criteria that was needed to become Olympic boxers.
Probably were getting paid when they were 12. Yeah.
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 Yeah, and you know, that's a good point, Frank and Charles, because if those guys you mentioned, like Rocky Graziano, I mean, he came from nothing. So did Jake LaMotta, you know, and they had amateur careers and they did all right, but they weren't thinking about the Olympics. They were prize fighters. They want the prize, which is the green stuff. So they had to. What are they going to do? They got to eat. So that idea of the Olympics or whatever, it might have been mentioned, but I would think they scoffed at it. You know, there was no way. They started young and there was no plan, in other words. Like a Rocky Graziano, that was about the only thing he really did well at that point in his life, other than getting in trouble all the time, was fight. And he could fight. So why don't you get paid for it? And that was basically it. And Jake LaMotta lived a few blocks away from him. So, you know, they were neighborhood kids. They fought when they were kids. That's what you did. You know, I always mention my dad, but he told me about all the streets of Chicago, and that was what you did. You ran into somebody you didn't like, and you started fighting them, and then some of them turned into professional fighters, or went into the Golden Globes. The Golden Gloves. That was the popular way of maybe going the boxing career if you wanted, if you were a poor guy, and you could. But most of the time, yeah, it was all about the green stuff. And since you could get paid to do this, why not? You can't wait until you're whatever. You might as well take it and run with it. And a lot of them did.
And again, I'm projecting back in the past, but I'm thinking the Golden Gloves was a way to find a promoter, to find an agent, to find someone to, you know, I won the Golden Gloves of New York. Someone give me a pro shot. You know, like the next day, the next week, as opposed to now I won the Golden Gloves, now I'm going to the Olympic trials, now I'm going to, it probably didn't happen that way. But the next year, or the next Olympics, I think that's where things started to change. Because you see this guy behind you, this brash kid out of Louisville, Kentucky. Who ever heard of, you know, who's coming out of Louisville, Kentucky, other than, it would have been Johnny Unitas, and that would have been later, not earlier, I think. Anyhow, you're looking at someone out of Louisville, Kentucky going, I see a different path. Cassius Clay, who becomes Muhammad Ali. And now I think we start to see the shift. Because also, let's look at it this way. The world is shifting away from radio to television. We're starting to see the guys more than hear the guys. We're starting to understand who they are. They're now on a bigger stage that we can see. And I'd have to go back and see if the Rome Games were the first ones that's really televised throughout the world, or at least throughout the nation on a regular basis. But now we see Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay become, with, I believe, Wilma Rudolph, the darlings of the games. And now we have this guy. Now, I still don't believe, from what I'm reading, what I'm hearing, no one thought that he was going to become heavyweight champion of the world because he was a light heavyweight. And he looked the part of a light heavyweight. But, I don't want Cassius Clay to hijack the show, but he hijacks everything else, so why not? So when we think Olympic boxing, yeah, Charles, I agree with you. You've got that 76 team, that 84 team, and some other people, Oscar De La Hoya, Roy Jones Jr., those things. This is the first guy I think of as an Olympic boxer. Am I right or wrong, Charles?
Wow, that's a tough one. I mean, I understand it, but I think I'm not sure if he's the first one that comes to my mind, simply because I don't think that unless you're a boxing historian, you really know enough about his Olympic glory. I mean, you know he won a gold medal, right? So the average.
That's what I mean. The not necessarily the first as the top guy, but the first Olympic boxer I think of as far as chronologically.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yes, I would agree with that because as you mentioned earlier about Floyd Patterson. Those that know, yeah, you're like, oh, that's nice. But then again, Ali was the one, or Cassius Clay was the one that kind of, that took it by storm, and he was starting to build his legend as well. So he had the little way he kind of carried himself, a little cocky. Also, too, let's be real about this. As you mentioned, I think it plays right into the point that you made earlier. Unless I read differently, Ali really didn't have, it wasn't like at home it was a major struggle. I mean, he had parents that, he lived a certain kind of way. They were not rich, but there's a big difference between the way he lived and some of the other guys that preceded him and maybe after. Not saying he was a rich guy, but I don't think he had to worry about a meal. So I think that balance allowed him to be able to take his time, do something towards positivity, and just take his time on working on his goals and his craft.
Right, and John, I going exactly to what he's saying and what you were saying before, we're reaching a time in the country where it's, okay, we now have established, or we're establishing, a middle class. So if you were part of the middle class or lower middle class or upper middle class, whatever you want to put it, what do you have to aspire to? Well, you don't necessarily have to get anything right this very second. You can maybe prolong that for a year or so if you see that path.
Exactly, and Cassius Clay was, like we were saying, or what I was saying earlier, he the one thing he did really well was fight and box, and he had a genius IQ as a boxer. He didn't like school. We know the whole story. Like I said, we don't want to hijack the show, but I just want to say something about Jose Torres too, because 56, won the gold medal, and we were talking off air, Frank, that this is a man that nobody talks about.
Right,
and
I forgot to talk about him again.
Right, this is a former world champion who only lost 3 fights out of 44 fights. He beat Willie Pastrano convincingly to win the title, and then he lost split decision to Dick Tiger, and another fight to Dick Tiger, and then he won again. And he retired at barely 33. But the point is that I think the way things changed too with the then Cassius is the man was already even then loaded with charisma. So he brought more to it than, he wasn't just a fighter. See, a lot of these guys were just fighters. He had that smile. He had that brashness. He had that way he talked. He was the whole package. So it brought it to another level. And boxing was still very popular then. And then I'm going to skip ahead for a second because we don't want to do all Cassius Clay. But when Joe Frazier wins the gold in '64, Joe Frazier, he grew up really poor, one of like 13 children, I think, if I remember correctly. And he had a plan, though. He had somebody behind him that said, look, we can win the gold medal, and that's going to be our springboard to a – and he won the gold medal purely by accident, in the sense that Buster Mathis beat him to get to the gold, to get to the Olympics, but Buster was hurt. So Joe replaced him, and though Joe wasn't 100%, he won the gold medal. So he got some good fortune in that respect. But Joe Frazier goes back away from the middle class that Cassius Clay was from, definitely from. He was the poor guy that found something that he could do and found something that he liked and found some people that were supportive of him and believed him. And Joe Frazier was married at 17. You're talking about the guy with kids, but he was also working full time when he was getting ready for the Olympics. So that's why I think, here we go again, Frank, but that's why I think he'd get mad at Muhammad Ali, because he'd say, what is he talking about? I'm the guy who came from nothing. You lived in a nice little house in Louisville. You didn't have to work like I did to do it. So you couldn't blame him in a sense. But, Muhammad was doing his thing. But that's why what makes boxing so interesting to me is that you always have these types of – a lot of times these guys come from nothing. But then there are other stories that you forget. Well, he wasn't necessarily poor. Like Oscar De La Hoya, for example, he wasn't poor, he wasn't rich, but he didn't even like boxing when he was a kid. He came from a long line of boxers, but there's some great stories with the Olympians, and again, the Spinks brothers too. That's what makes it so fascinating.
Well, and as we're looking, you said Joe Frazier, that's the story that I think that we almost always pair him with Ali, and there's a reason for it. He's the next Olympic, big gold medalist. And we forget like you said, he wasn't supposed to be there. We forget that he had other things on his plate. We just think it's mano a mano for the next dozen years, and there's more to it than that. And then we progress past Joe Frazier. Okay, so we've got the next two heavyweight studs. Then we get to George Foreman in '68. And there's that famous picture of George Foreman holding the flag and all that. And even though that George Foreman, we don't necessarily pair with the charisma of the George Foreman decades later, he showed that during the Olympics, I think. During the '68 Olympics. Charles, I mean, we're looking at more names coming out in Mexico City. And, of course, we're going to get, the track and field stars and all the things that happen there. But George Foreman goes to Mexico City and says, I'm the next guy you got to worry about.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, but the sad thing about that for George Foreman is it's like he's a guy that cannot catch a break from that standpoint of popularity of the people. Because at that time, he should have been the guy. He's waving the American flag. He should be somebody that should receive a lot of admiration from the United States, people in the United States. But unfortunately, the political unrest and things that were going on with civil rights in '68 really took that from him. And even when he was trying to be the nice guy, smiling and everything, he got ridiculed from the African-American community. Because when you think about John Carlos, in that situation where they wore the black gloves on the stand, Tommy Smith and John Carlos, and they got ridiculed, shut down, that they were, unpatriotic and basically stripped of anything you can think of, while George Foreman's on the platform smiling like I'm a happy American. So it was a real serious
double-edged sword, right?
Yeah, because it's like, hey, I'm American. Cassius Clay was American. He's happy, right? They kind of did the same thing. Here I come, '68, because all this drama, and my own people, along with some other Americans, not just people of color, kind of looked at him a certain way. So it was like a catch-22. But yeah, I think to me that's really sad, and maybe that is the type of thing that kind of propelled him to be the type of guy with his personality that he became, because he was like, damn, it's my turn. And he got pissed off because of the reaction. So then at that point, he become a mummy. As they said, the guy with the woo, you looking crazy, and me, I'm going to knock you out. And just all of that identity. Imagine, real quick, if he had been, received like Cassius Clay. Imagine that. If all of America, particularly African-American community, was like, George, you're our guy, our champion, he might have been a whole different guy compared to what he had to evolve into or go back to after the lessons from Muhammad Ali.
Right. And we always ask that question to George Foreman. How did that guy become the guy, the George Foreman grill and all that stuff? Well, if you think about it, that guy was the guy in the Olympics, I would think. Now, I'm reading a lot into that, but he showed some personality. He showed that he was a nice guy. He showed that he was happy to be the Olympic champion and all that. And then everyone crapped on him. Okay, you want the bully? You got it.
Yeah.
You want the bear?
Frank,
you got it.
Frank, and then he also worked with Sonny Liston and really liked Sonny Liston. They got to be really good friends, and Sonny Liston mentored him. You know what Sonny Liston was about. So George Foreman kind of adopted that stare and a lot of that intimidating persona that Sonny Liston had. So, I think he was a different person in a lot of ways when he came back 10 years later. I'm sure he was that guy too, a nice guy, and was lucky enough to see him sparring in the 70s before he fought Muhammad Ali. And you could tell that, sure, he'd kill you, but with those punches, but he didn't seem like a mean guy or anything, even if he was trying. I didn't necessarily get that impression. But again, he really idolized Sonny Liston, and he was really devastated when Sonny died. And that was only 2 years into his pro career, basically.
Right.
So he liked that persona, but it worked perfectly with Muhammad Ali. Real fast, there's a clip that you can find on YouTube, which I love, where Joe Frazier, Muhammad Ali, and George Foreman are in the same ring at the same time. They get announced like they used to do in the great old days. And Ali takes his jacket off and he starts doing all the things with Joe Frazier. And here comes George Foreman, the guy who rarely smiles and everything, but he liked Muhammad Ali. And this is right before Frazier and Ali fought the second time. So this is in 74, right? And Ali, it starts to go after him when George comes in the ring. And then George suddenly turns and goes like this, and Ali, it's hilarious.
Wait a second.
Yeah, it's funny as hell. So I just think it's ironic in a sense that you have those three guys. You have Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, George Foreman, who will dominate the heavyweight stratosphere for the next so many years, and they follow each other in the Olympics. I mean, it's pretty fascinating if you think about it, and the way it just almost like it was destined.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, we're talking, 40 some years later, or 50 some years later in some cases, that those are still three of the heavyweights or boxers that are foremost in what we think. When we think boxers, you think Ali, you think Frazier, you think Foreman. You may throw in 5 or 6 other guys, but to the casual boxing fan, boom, boom, boom. Like you said, they came up in 3 years or 3 Olympics consecutively. And then we get to 72, which now I was talking to my brother about this the other day, and I was 6 years old, 5 years old, whatever. So what I remember of that Olympics is when Jim McKay came on and the Israeli athletes have been kidnapped and all that. I don't remember much else because as we just, and I hate to use the French way I said it, kidnapped the show, but that kidnapped the show basically back in 72. You got Mark Spitz, you got all these other things, but it appears as if none of that happened because of what happened. At least it seems that way in my memory. Anyway, so we're looking at a couple of guys here, actually 3 or 4 guys that jump out at me. For the Americans, Sugar Ray Seals. And when you mention Sugar Rays, you don't mention Sugar Ray Seals, but then when you think about it, you go, yeah, does he belong in the mix? I mean, there are only so many guys we call Sugar Ray, but Ray Seals had a pretty good career. And then, John, you mentioned off the air, Marvin Johnson, who we know Marvin Johnson, but I don't remember Marvin Johnson as being an Olympian. So that's pretty impressive. And then going into the thing, Sugar Ray Seals also fought Marvin Hagler, Alan Minter coming out of England, who, and we understand, if you don't know what happened with Alan Minter and Marvin Hagler, you need to watch it. It's just insane. But not that same star power in 72 that we're going to talk about with the guys in 60, 64, and 68. And then, of course, we're going to let Charles run to the next Olympics of 76. And I don't even know if I need to go to the next screen on my end, but let's just throw a few names at you there.
No doubt.
John Tate. Go ahead. You go ahead.
No. I'm just thinking as you're talking. Go ahead. Say the name.
Well, we're looking at bronze medalist John Tate. Did John Tate end up being heavyweight champion? Yes. We're looking at lightweight champion Howard Davis. Howard Davis Jr., we should say. Okay. Then you've got Leo Randolph. Did Leo Randolph win a bet as a featherweight? Mm-hmm. Then we've got Ray Leonard, Michael Spinks, and Leon Spinks. I don't know that you need to say much more about that, at least from my end. I'll let Charles do that. But that's 3 of those guys as you go, champions, and again, in your head. So, Charles, I know you like this group, so go ahead and talk about it. John, flow in when you can, if he gives you a chance.
I will. I'm not like you anyway. I'm just joking. No, but I think part of this for me was I remember watching Olympic boxing. I remember 1976, I was in a place called Goodwater, Alabama. And we were leaving home in Ohio to go to a family reunion. And it was hot as all get out. We're on a nice air-conditioned bus going to the hotel. And it's like 5 and 6 of my cousins and relatives in one room. And we're like little boys. And we're just in there. And only time you go outside, unless you go into a situation to the pool, and a lot of stuff was going on. It is hot as the dickens in Alabama. And of course, so when I think about that boxing, Olympic boxing, to me, that was must-see TV. It was. And you think back when we were growing up, at least I can say for myself, there were 3 stations, man. 3 stations, and you might have got lucky if you put some aluminum foil on the rabbit ears. You might have got a little UHF in your life. So, but with that being
ABC,
said,
CBS, and Snow.
Yeah. With that being said, knowing that I had to see this, and I kept always asking before we left, would I be able to see the fights? My dad said, oh yeah, they got TVs down there. I was like, that doesn't mean they gonna show the fight. It's Alabama. They probably should do it. I had no clue that it was network TV, right? I'm just like, well, I can't see the fight. So anyway, I have all these cousins in there. And of course, they always waited till like Saturday to often replay all of the fights where they would, kind of, it already taken place because of the time difference and whatnot. But to watch those guys fight, I mean, the fact that to watch Sugar Ray Leonard come in, he was flamboyant and he had the little shimmy and the shake early on. And then you say, man, there are two brothers, the Spinks brothers. I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Leon and Michael, two different weight classes. And then you mentioned about John Tate. There was so much talent over there that really wasn't recognized. But because those three guys, Leonard and the two Spinks brothers, were so dominant and so exciting. When I watched them, I was like, they're going to win. It was just exciting to watch them perform. And with that being said, like I said, with my cousin, I fight my cousins for the TV as well. It was like, man, what are you doing? I said, I don't care. I got to watch this fight. So you're watching the fights. But the whole point of it is, to me, even though we had some serious heavyweights or some serious boxing going on professionally, and we knew what had happened before with George Foreman. You mentioned about Cassius Clay, Frazier. I mean, you go all the way back in Olympic boxing. To me, this was like that shot of breath of fresh air and great freshness that came through, because all of this talent at one time was there. And it wasn't like they were, when you looked at those bouts, it wasn't like you go, well, yeah, they kind of got challenged today. It was no question. These are going to be champions. These guys, you're watching right now, in my mind, I was like, yeah, I can't wait till they get to the pros, because they were champions and they look like a class act that they were in the ring that early. And that was something I wasn't used to, because I really wasn't able to follow Cassius Clay in the Olympics. But that was like my first time to go, oh, so that's what they do. They go to Olympic boxing, they all become champions, right? The great ones. So that first taste was something I will never, ever forget.
Well, John, let me throw something at you here, because this is, and I know your background is a little more extensive than mine is, but in my mind, this is the first time where I saw, and we'll throw Howard Davis Jr. in that mix as well.
Sure.
Didn't have the pro career that we thought he would have, but he was one of the standouts of that team as well. This is the first time in my recollection where you actually started thinking more about the lighter weights, the welders, the lightweights, the light welders, whatever you want to call it, than you were thinking about boxing as being run by the heavyweights. Now, in this Olympics, we see Teofilo Stevenson, and no one's beating him. We get that from Cuba. We understand that. John Tate was, good, but you're not going to beat that guy. That guy's a pro, even though he's not a pro. Not fair. But we start seeing, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, and we've got Duran, we've got guys out there at that age, at that time, that are in the lighter weights. But from, I think, the general public's perspective, we see a Howard Davis Jr. and a Ray Leonard go, wait a second, we can follow these guys in the lighter weights now. And I think that got us more boxing oriented, because it wasn't just one weight class, it was now 4 or 5 weight classes.
Oh, for sure, Frank. And I think it might have started a little with Sugar Ray Seals 4 years before, because he was a
right, good point.
So he's a little less. So he finally had a break from the heavyweights, winning it 3 years in a row, right? And that team, that is just a magical time. I know what you're saying, Charles. I couldn't wait to watch those guys fight, and they were all so damn good. And the other thing is they had great stories, like the two brothers, Ray Leonard. What was going? Was he going to turn pro? What was he going to do? He was engaged? I can't remember if he was married yet or something.
He had the girlfriend and little Ray.
He had little Ray, that's right, and he kept saying, "I'm not going to go pro. I'm not going to go pro." And yeah. And he was always his own man, though, Ray Leonard. He always went by. You could even see then that he's going to do what he wants to do. Howard Davis, he had so much talent, and he what happened in the spring, never won a world title, but he fought for the world title, never won one. And then you had the very quiet man, Leo Randolph, who was one of the best people you'll ever talk to in your life, who did it all under the shadow of these guys, or not actually away from the shadow of these guys, and still managed to do his own thing and win a gold medal. That was just a dream year in '76. And real quick, the thing that when you're talking about it, it just makes me, it's hard. It's hard because there's really never been in '84. You know, we obviously came back in '84, but after that, it just went bye-bye, you know, as far as this kind of talent and this kind of team and this. So you didn't think that then. I remember thinking that, hell, we're going to do this every 4 years. We're going to dominate every 4 years. And now, shoot, since Andre Ward in 2004, we can't even barely get into the rounds. We can't even the medal rounds. So it's just kind of shocking when you think back to, were we that much better in those days, or guys aren't boxing like they used to? I mean, that's the big $1 million question, as far as I'm concerned. Why is the talent level gone down? What has changed so much since 1976, 84, Oscar in 92?
Well, this is whenever this argument is put up, and we're right in the meat of the argument right now, when you say, okay, the 76 team has Leo Randolph, Howard Davis Jr., Ray Leonard, Michael Spinks, Leon Spinks, and then part of that is John Tate. Cool. I give you that. That's great. And I'm not trying to cement the argument one way or another, and I'm not trying to make it any better or any worse. And what I should have done is I should also put on here the guys that qualified for the 80 team that didn't go because of the boycott. I should have done that, and I didn't. I apologize for that. It didn't occur to me until much later. But then we jump to the 84 team. Now, you can say what you want, and maybe we should have went to the Goodwill Games instead of the Olympics. I don't know. Remember the Goodwill Games? Yeah, okay. But when we look at the 84 team, and for those of you that don't remember or don't have any recollection of it, when we boycotted, the United States boycotted in 80, the communist countries boycotted in 84. So no Teofil Stevenson, no Russians, no Cubans, nobody like that. Now, that seems like a big deal until you look at the fighters that are there and you look at what they did after that. So we win a gold with a light flyweight with Paul Gonzalez. Flyweight with Steve McCrory. Featherweight, Meldrick Taylor. Lightweight, Pernell Whitaker, which I always think that Pernell Whitaker is smaller than Meldrick Taylor. I never get that in my head. Columbus's own Jerry Page, a light welterweight. Got to throw that plug in there for you. Welterweight, Mark Breland. Light middleweight, Frank Tate. Middleweight, who silvered but didn't get gold, Virgil Hill. And we all know about Virgil Hill. Heavyweight, Henry Tillman. I'm sorry, where I missed one. Light heavyweight, Evander Holyfield gets the bronze. Heavyweight, Henry Tillman. Super heavyweight, Tyrell Biggs. And then Francesco Damiani actually ended up being a heavyweight champion as well from Italy. And then, so there are lots of things there. Now, here is my point. I'm not trying to prove the argument one way or another, but even without the Russians and the Cubans and whomever else, you have several world champions as professionals. So even though we're looking at the Ray Leonard Spinks brothers as becoming world champions there, Meldrick Taylor, Pernell Whitaker, Jerry Page, Mark Breland, Evander Holyfield, Virgil Hill, Henry Tillman, Tyrell Biggs. Did Tillman win a title? I don't think Tillman won a title, but they all were world titles at some point. So is this a better, deeper squad than the 76 team? I put it to Charles Farmer, who's always trying to straddle the fence on this. And I may have proven it, but I wasn't trying to prove it. Go ahead.
I hate you anyway. That figure of speech. Talent-wise, the roster clearly was deeper. Yes, I mean you cannot take away from how deep they were. I mean Jerry Page from here in Columbus, just a really good guy and solid in the ring as well. Think about Biggs, Mark Breland, really another super nice guy. And then you go on and on and on, and then Sweet Pea, Meldrick Taylor, deep, Virgil Hill. In regards to the roster talent, yeah, they clearly had the numbers. They did. Anybody that wants to say they're better than 76, I really wouldn't argue with you. But I think for me, though, it's just that the way that, to me, that the 76 team, and I just say the trio, Let's go there. Let's go there. Okay.
Okay.
Say that Sugar Ray Leonard and the Spinks brothers impacted boxing. The way that they came out and boom, they did what they did, and then afterwards it was like boom, boom, boom. You're like, okay, 84 deeper. You can have no problem with all of the talent. You can't even argue that they were a deeper team, and maybe should we see the accolades as perhaps the best roster, maybe the best team. But the influence and the impact that Sugar Ray Leonard and the Spinks brothers had, you think about it from the standpoint of Sugar Ray Leonard comes out after he goes directly after Duran, loses, comes back, does what he does, becomes an all-time champion. Michael Spinks goes from whatever he does to light heavy, becomes one of the greatest champions of all time. And even Leon, say what you want to, Leon took down the great master, shortly thereafter, and some people might say it was a little quirky on the decision, but he did it. That is impact. And for me, that impact so early says a lot. And it reminds me very quickly of, and I had to remind myself, because I brought this up to John before, I'm always questioning, why Lomachenko only have so many fights? And then I started thinking back, well, hell, how many fights did Leon Spinks have before he fought Ali? So I had to really reference that and play it back because I'm so used to such a long career and working your way up. And I think that's why it's impressive of what the trio did, along with what a guy like Lomachenko can do in such a short time period. But I would have to say, if you wanted to say 84 was the most deepest and best roster of Olympic boxers, I would not have a problem with it. But I will tell you, as far as impact is concerned, that trio from 76 was amazing. I would never, ever forget them because, as you mentioned, the one thing that they also did for me was they forced me to look outside who I thought the greatest of all time was behind me and behind John. It changed the game where I could, down in the future, look at, make a call to you and go, hey, man, these two little guys fighting. And then look up and recognize one of the guys ends up being Manny Pacquiao and Juan Manuel Marquez right when they're coming up, and we had no idea who the hell they were. But because of that experience of having the lesser weights come around, you can appreciate a Milt McCoy, a guy like that, or Steve McCoy, what have you, because of the experience of the trio from 76.
And that's a point that I would not have thought of. But again, I don't think the way you think, so that's probably a good thing. But it's a very valid point because it's not just what they accomplished, it's what they brought. And I think, as you're saying, we're at this point, the Montreal Olympics are on TV, and we're seeing and we're hearing the stories and the Howard Cosell up close and personal. We're getting the Ray Leonard and Little Ray, and we're getting the brothers from St. Louis. We're understanding those stories now, so that impact has a little bit more to it. John, now we're looking at I'm going to do this, and I shouldn't, and I'm actually, you go ahead and do what you're going to say, and then I'll throw something in after, because it looks like you've got something you want to say about this.
Well, that was exactly what I was thinking. It says that Charles and I, great minds, we think alike. I mean, it's just the way it goes, Frank.
I'm over here by myself. Frank.
Yeah, that was the impact was huge. I mean, those guys, Sugar Ray Leonard, Howard Davis, they captured the imagination. The Spinks brothers, it was the most exciting for me boxing Olympics that I've ever seen and will ever see, without question. 80-14. Definitely good, probably better, like Charles was saying, deeper. The Henry Tillman and Tyrell Biggs never won any world titles. But as far as the other guys, I mean, Holyfield and Virgil Hill and Breland. But see, they didn't have – some of them – this is the thing. Sugar Ray had the personality. Even the Spinks brothers had personality, more personality. Right. And as much as some fighters hate that, hey, they want me to do this, that's not me. Well, that does help with the public. And what you said at the end is true. You had Howard Cosell, and he immediately fell in love with Sugar Ray Leonard because he's always looking to latch on to the hot shot. He had Muhammad Ali all those other years. So now it's Sugar Ray. Sugar Ray is soft-spoken and everything, and then you got the Spinks. I mean, it was a combination of fighting talent and personalities. And the United States, we just went nuts over those guys. I mean, that's a fact, and it was just such a great time. And then these guys, they were like the dream team. In 84, you're like, you're like, they're going to win. they're so damn good. So it was almost expected that they would win, and they did, and they deserved it. But that team was just amazing. But I don't remember feeling the same. I don't know what the word is, excitement when I was watching. I expected them to win. It was one of those deals.
Well, I think what I was going to add to it, and you actually hit it, is that at that point, there were two factors leading into that. One, we had seen the excellence of the 76 team. Then we didn't have an 80 team. And then we had the boycott by the other countries. So I think the overriding factor of what we're looking at is, we're winning this one. We don't have the Cubans. We don't have to face Teofilo Stevenson, so our heavyweights got a chance. We don't have the Russians. It's in our backyard in L.A. All these factors, like, we're going to walk in and we're going to walk through these people, and we did. And
you know what else, real fast, Frank, is that Breland was the guy that got a lot of the ink, most of the ink. Right. He was the one that they were all talking about. It was the greatest amateur ever and everything. And I remember when I saw Mildred Taylor go, wow.
Whoa, yeah.
He didn't get a lot of ink, and of course Pernell Whitaker also, but Breland was the guy everybody was talking about. But I was more impressed with Mildred Taylor and Pernell Whitaker when I saw them. I go, man, these guys are good.
And that's what I was going to say. When you look at it and you're pairing them up, as we do bracket to bracket, team to team, okay, do any of those guys beat Sugar Ray Leonard in their prime? Probably not, but it's close. They don't get blown out. So as we look at Sugar Ray going up and down between Mildred Taylor, Pernell Whitaker, Bart Breland, Sugar Ray wins probably, but it's not like it's just a walk in the park. I'm going to say at light heavy or cruiserweight or whatever you want to call it, or heavyweight, I'm going to say Evander Holyfield beats Michael Spinks. Again, not by a huge margin, but I think he wears it. Yeah, there we go. I'm going to say that.
I was thinking that a few minutes ago, Frank. I'm like, whoa.
Wow.
Now, again, I'm not saying it's a walk in the park. I think Evander wears him down. Yeah, that's just my take. Okay.
Michael could box.
Okay. We're allowed to disagree. It's okay.
Michael
That's what we're
box,
here for.
Frank. Michael could really box.
I'm not saying he couldn't. I know what I see from Evander Holyfield in the future. Now, at this time in the Olympics, no, Michael Spinks beats Evander Holyfield. I'm not saying. I'm talking down the road when we're talking world-class title fights, that kind of thing. And then, I'm not going to say that Tyrell Biggs or Henry Tillman can beat Leon Spinks, but I'm not saying Leon Spinks just walks in and just says, I'm Leon Spinks, fight's over. So we're looking at those core three, and Edge goes to the 76 team. But again, if you even it all out, you've got – I'm not trying to say that the 84 team is better. I'm not saying that. I'm just trying to throw a couple more spokes in a couple more kinks into the wheel here. But okay, go ahead and say something. You look like you have something to say.
Of course. I mean, I think hey, we all have the beautiful thing about this is we all have our opinions, and
right.
you can be right no matter what. So we're just sharing. But I don't know. The only reason why I think that particularly on the weight, that's the key. We're talking about light heavy, and from that standpoint or whatever, and not heavyweight, I think that Michael Spinks would give Holyfield the business. And I say that because when Michael Spinks first came in, everybody thought he was soft. And then you start thinking about the Dwight Braxton, Kawhi, whatever, the old names, and a lot of competition was coming at him. And these were some tough guys. These guys that had spent time in prison. They were hardcore, no holds barred type of, I will get physical with you and spit in your face, and like I'm watching that movie Penitentiary. Anyway, but it comes back to that point where you see where these were mean dudes, right? Michael Spinks was from St. Louis. They came back from a tough background, but initially the way it's being portrayed, okay, the little cute little soft little boy is going to get ate up. And I think the factor that the way, not only did he come through, but I mean, he was at times dominant. I mean, he was just like, he didn't miss a beat. And I think right then and there, that to me would have been the problem for Holyfield, because Holyfield down the line, I mean, he was a hell of a fighter. He never quit. He always put down a strong effort. But there were times that he kind of lapsed. And it's like what we thought the better fighter, more experienced fighter, whatever, always came up. I mean, he earned his due and he won a lot of good fights. But to fight a guy like Michael Spinks, who went against guys that were just nastier and what we say had that DAWG, that dog in them, because they've been through some things, and Spinks still like pss, 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 going through his regiment. I think if they were to meet at early on, that what Spinks would have used against him, because Holyfield would never stop coming, but Spinks had a way at the right weight. He had a way of he had that moxie where he could also do that. We said it before. He was a technician. He's an early technician where he just didn't have one style. He had enough power to knock you down and knock you out, but he also had enough moxie to box, stay away, put his hands up. It's almost like watching Joe Frazier at light heavy. You know what I'm saying? It's like this with size. Waiting, doing what he had to do. And I think overall, that's what happened. But that's just my opinion. Plus, I'm a huge Michael Spinks fan, so you're not gonna get away with that one so easy.
This is why I love this show, because I say something stupid and you guys run with it. But it's also because it doesn't have to stay necessarily on topic, even though it stays on topic. So, John, I'm going to ask you this question, and it's not like we're going to run to another subject, but it's kind of the same thing. Do you think that historically we don't put Michael Spinks in that category of one of the all-time greats because he got blasted out by Mike Tyson?
Yes. I was thinking the same thing, Frank. So there, you upped your game into the greatness of Charles and myself. So congratulations. Congratulations on that. You finally joined us. It's like, come on, man. No, I think that people remember that more than anything else about Michael Spinks. Right. That was that was the only fight the man lost. He beat Larry Holmes twice. You can debate me all you want on that. He beat Eddie Mustafa Muhammad. He beat Yaki Lopez. He knocked out Marvin Johnson with one of the best left hooks you'll ever see in your life. Right. He knocked out Jerry Cooney. I mean, Cooney wasn't the same guy, but that doesn't matter. He knocked him out. Right. So, yeah, I think that lost to Tyson because he didn't barely even look like himself anymore. I mean, he couldn't move, whether he was scared or not. I never want to say that with fighters because the guts it takes to get into the ring and throw hands with another man is just incredible to me. And he had a mean side that you'd see every now and then, even though he wasn't a mean guy. So he doesn't get the credit. I think that the Spinks jinx was it was amazing. While he was fighting before he fought Tyson, he got a lot of credit. I mean, He did. And he was kind of awkward, but then he could turn it, he could change on a dime, which was always really cool to watch. Yeah, he'd be rumbling with you. He beat Dwight Muhammad Kwai also, who was about as tough as they come. But he could do other things. So I got to say that I think he would have taken Holyfield too. I think he would have decisioned, Frank. I think it would have been very close, but I think he would have edged him because he had more versatility at that point as a light heavyweight that he could have outboxed him. I mean, you faced down Dwight Muhammad Kwai, who was like a smaller version of Joe Frazier, and you beat him. That says a lot. And now Holyfield did too. So that's what I mean. This would be a hell of a fight. But I think that Spinks could have took him. It would have been close. They probably would have had to fight a couple of times, but I think Spinks could have beat him.
Well, you mentioned something that I think is, now that at this point of my life, I understand, at this point in my life and that time of my life, I'm starting to see what's going on. I think coming out of that Olympics, out of the 76 Olympics and moving forward into what they did as pros, we kind of went, Leon, you got a lucky break. And not to disparage anything, but you got the title fight after 9 fights. You beat the man. And then you kind of went back to being, not that you were bad, but you weren't Michael. Michael comes out and gets the job done. Like you said, he's not losing fights. He's beating guys that other people can't touch. So at that point, we're thinking, at least in my mind, okay, They came out of the Olympics as, okay, the story was Leon, but Michael was the one that really was probably better. Out of the Olympics, after the Olympics, like, obviously Michael's a better fighter, a better guy, better all this, and Leon was kind of the refrigerator Perry of boxing. That's a decent analogy, but it doesn't really say what I'm trying to say. And then after Michael loses to Tyson the way he loses, we've discounted his entire career, and we look at Leon and go, hey, you beat Ali. It's almost as if Michael's career didn't exist except for other people that are fight fans. And you mentioned the greatest fighters of all time, or the greatest heavyweights of all time. Michael Spinks' name is nowhere to be found. Do you want to see a fight? Yeah. Do you want to see a Michael Spinks fight? No. People don't ask that. They don't want to see a Michael Spinks fight. Charles, anyone ever said, hey, we got to see that Michael Spinks fight?
No. Like I said, but I think part of that has to do with them being so caught up and enamored with Tyson. I mean, that he was the guy that was so hard, and then you come up with Michael Spinks that's supposed to be this tough guy, supposed to be undefeated coming in, and he's finally gonna give Tyson a match. And for whatever reason, he did not show up. He wasn't available, and Tyson pummeled him. But then again, the disrespect to me is the ignorance of people. And if you call yourself a boxing fan, go back and think about how great Michael Spinks was coming through his division. And when he walked the way through, John mentioned about all those are some tough ass fighters, man. I mean, they were, again, Dwight Kwawi, Muhammad Kwawi. Are you kidding? Dude looked like they released him out of prison 5 days before the fight. And he was just mean, came in there, the bald head and everything. But Michael Spinks came in and so strong and had such a solid career, would fight anybody. You never saw him saying, I don't want to fight that guy. And I think with Tyson, a lot of people thought he was going to do better, but to just really minimalize, shortchange him, his whole career based on one fight is just bad. Because I would say, if nothing else, people go back and watch some of his fights, and I think you have a better perspective of who he was. And you mentioned about Leon, 9 fights. So Leon gets credit for the Ali fight, but think about Leon, love him or hate him or whatever. Leon made the point. The one thing I respect about Leon, in that fight, I was torn because I love Ali and I like Leon. I was like, I hope they don't fight. Now they're in the ring, right? I'm like, what the hell is this? My emotions were all over the place. But the point of it was, Leon did enough to make you think, damn, did he win that fight? And against Ali, even though he's older at the time, right? This little young guy coming in, it made me think, damn, he got in there. What's wrong with Ali? That kind of thing. But the whole premise of it was he was there, and not too many people, even on a scale when Ali might have had an off night, could come in and at least stay with him a little bit and kind of battle him a little bit and make you think there might be a chance the champ lost.
I'll carry it a step further. He did enough to make you think he was going to have a career. Yeah. He did enough to make you think not only did he maybe win this fight, but even if he didn't win this fight, he's got a chance to be heavyweight champion down the road.
Yeah.
And obviously that didn't happen. That's the thing. We didn't want to let Cassius Clay hijack the show. Now we let Michael Spinks hijack the show, which I think is funny. It's one of those things where you look at it, you say, we lumped Michael Spinks in with Trevor Berbick, with Bone Crusher Smith, with Kevin Ferguson, and all the other people that we just said Mike Tyson just walked through them. And so we don't give them credit or give Michael Spinks credit for having been Michael Spinks before he became another victim of Mike Tyson. So
yeah,
all right.
Frank,
okay, go ahead.
Frank, real fast. It's kind of like Bob Foster. Bob Foster, he couldn't beat Muhammad Ali, he couldn't beat Joe Frazier, but you don't hear people talk about that very much. You talk about what a great light heavyweight champion he was. You talk about how he almost killed Mike Quarry in 1972. He knocked out Vincent Rondon 2 rounds before that. a fighter shouldn't be remembered just by one fight. Real fast, let me say this about Leon Spinks. I was really angry at him after the Ali fight. I was mad at him because I thought I was walking around going, "You lucky bum!" Like Ali didn't even. I shouldn't use the word bum, but I was a kid. Ali didn't even train for you. He's way past his prime. Let him get in shape, and we'll do it again and see what happens. So obviously, when they fought again in New Orleans, I was dancing all over the living room while I was watching that one. But then I felt bad later. Like, look, Leon Spinks was one of those gentle kind of guys that his worst enemy is himself. Mm-hmm. And he might have been better as a pro if he had taken his career a little bit more seriously, like his brother. And everybody tried, but so he's a super nice guy too. So it's one of those deals where you can't help it. Some people are just more dedicated and some aren't.
Well, all right, so let's close the book on that because we still have a couple of decades left to go. But understanding, I went into this with a premise of these are the two teams and that's it. And even though these things have now happened in my lifetime, my adult lifetime, I'm like, I don't remember them as great as I remember or think I remember 76 and 84. But let's move on to 88, the Seoul Olympics. Now, all I remember from that Olympics, even though I know I watched all the boxing, all I remember is the decision for Roy Jones Jr. And there's no easier way to say that than what most people are thinking. But also in that Olympics, you had Michael Garbahall, Kennedy McKinney, Henry Mass from Germany, who comes out as middleweight and ends up, holding the belt for quite some time. Ray Mercer, not bad. And then the super heavyweights, and I almost forget this, Lennox Lewis against Riddick Bowe. And Lennox Lewis from Canada at that point ends up being the super heavyweight champion. Now, you can go down in history and say Lennox Lewis and Riddick Bowe are right there, top 10 heavyweights of all time. I don't know if you're going to go that close, but there's an argument for them to be in the conversation of the best heavyweights to ever fight. And I kind of forget about that because of the Roy Jones Jr. thing. And Michael Garbahall in his weight class, one of the best to ever do it as well. Mm-hmm. The thing that I think is funny, not funny, but is tragic about this is that, and maybe it's a good thing, if Roy Jones hadn't been whatever, we may not have thought of him the same way when he came out as a pro. We may have, well, he's good, but he's not that guy. John, is it safe to say that we had a more of a affinity for Roy Jones after the bad decision than we maybe would have had he won?
Yeah, I think so, because anybody with eyes saw that he was the best fighter. He was the most talented fighter. He got screwed big time. Should have had the gold. Everybody knew it. So most people, at least that I remember back, just thought of him as a gold medalist, even though he officially wasn't, according to the Olympics. But there were always things about the Olympics that bothered most people. The scoring was kind of ridiculous sometimes, and the people cheering for whatever, and it was always a groaner, and that even went back before that. There you'd see a judge scoring, you go, what? And then the referee always seemed to be getting involved all the time. It used to drive me nuts. Guy would back off and go over and give him a warning, and I go, what's he giving him a warning for? I get it, it's amateurs. But they got in the way, where the good referee stays out of the way. They were constantly getting in the way, warning guys. But, yeah, I actually think Roy Jones gained some fans after the Olympics, as did Ray Mercer, who, was a sergeant in the Army. And he was another very affable guy, great guy. And he won the gold, and he was older, if you remember, when he won the gold. So it was a great story. Right. Again, the background story in sports, especially in boxing, since it's an individual sport, is what really captures people. And in Roy Jones, back to Roy Jones, this guy, like I said, we all knew he was the best fighter. We were wowed by his talent. And the only way that he supposedly lost was because of the stupid Olympics. So, yes, did he gain some exposure, some sympathy? Yes, like Holyfield did what happened to him, in the Olympics. And so, but then there's also a lot of, God, the Olympics, what are they doing? So, but yeah, he came out of there on fire, Roy Jones. It didn't take him long to start making a mark.
even his opponent knew that he gotten beat.
Yes.
That says a lot right there. When your opponent's like, "No, I didn't win this fight. I got some home cooking and I didn't deserve." So, all right, now Charles, we're looking at now. We'll skip Henry Masvidal since he's from East Germany, but again, another solid fighter, another pro. But what did you see out of, or what did you think from the Lennox Lewis Riddick Bowe? Are you looking at? Do you think you're looking at the next great heavyweight class, or is like, no, I'm not sure about that?
I think for me, I wasn't sure. One, because of the factor that, who Lennox Lewis was and where he came from. And, not saying that we have not had any.
Or didn't come from or whatever, yeah.
Like the Canadian champions. And Riddick Bowe was strong, but he was so big that you're like, wow, is he ever going to be able to transform and get in shape like we want him to and be the guy we want him to be? So, and the way that we were accustomed to heavyweights from that time on, from back in the day till that time, I'm not sure. I think it was we were on the fence, right? I mean, at least I was, from the standpoint of did I think Lennox Lewis was the next great champion? No, maybe that was my issue with him from the beginning. Anyway, but I wouldn't say that. I thought when I saw him, I was like, okay, he's good, but it was like, still, how good really is he? And I think when you look at that standpoint from that, and then when you saw Teofimo Stevenson, right, you knew this is a grown man, and you little boys or even young boys don't belong here. Right. He's older and he has more fights, but it still was like, can't the younger guys bang with him? You know what I mean? That can they just give him a fight? But it was like, I'm a pro. I'm a pro. If you come in here, this is what's going to happen. So, and I think that's when you think about dominance and what Stevenson might have done had he, made that jump over or defected or what have you. But to see these two big guys like this, you still were wondering what the next step was too. And I think we waited, for me anyway, I'll just say this, I think I was spoiled, again, from 76. Because if you have an impact, the Spinks brothers again and Leonard, that's having an impact. How long is it going to take you to get into the mix with the big boys? And with Lennox Lewis and Riddick Bowe is, you do the math.
Is it safe to say, John, and this was my take on it, but is it safe to say they appear to be amateur fighters? What I mean by that is an amateur fight is 3 rounds. You're not going for the knockout. You're going to score points, and you're not in it to go 12 or 15 rounds.
Yeah, and you hear it all the time. They'll say some things like, you'll hear somebody say, well, he's still fighting like an amateur. He needs to bring his game up. He needs, like Lomachenko when he lost that one fight to Salido. He was still fighting like an amateur. He tended to slap a little bit more, and it was like, that's not going to work in the pros anymore. Salido got real dirty with him, roughed him up, won a disputed decision. But it was, in a sense, it's a learning experience for any guy who comes out of the amateurs with a lot of success, except Golovkin. Golovkin, see, that's the thing. A guy like Golovkin had a pro style already. He might lose a decision to somebody, but he had a come forward, aggressive, occasionally counterpunch. And then way back to what we said before, to those other guys like Rocky Graziano, they had a pro style. So they're not going to work in the 3 round. They didn't even get going until the round 3, So yeah, and that's why for some of them they didn't do as well in the pros, obviously, as they did in the amateurs, because they found out that when you get in the pros, it's a different game.
Well, as Charles mentioned, conditioning and whatnot of Riddick Bowe, he can go 3 rounds. Can he go 6? Is he going to be able to do that? And I don't know if conditioning is the right word, but he's still young, hadn't worked on his body, hadn't worked on things that he probably needed to do. And with Lennox Lewis, like you said, he even, and this is, I think, I'm going to put words in Charles' mouth here, but this is part of the problem I think he has with him. Is like the DAWG, he didn't really seem to show until he had to much, much later. He wasn't willing to go into deep waters. He was like, okay, I'm going to use my height, my length, and my size to stay here and play it safe until he didn't have a choice, which was much, much later. So I get that, and that's where I look at this fight and go, wow, this is two of the better heavyweights we've seen in the last few decades fighting the Olympics, and I barely remember it. Ugh. And of course, I think it's also overshadowed by Roy Jones Jr., but I barely remember that happening. So, and I remember Michael Carbajal, but I think I remember Kennedy McKinney a little bit. I don't remember that heavyweight fight at all. All right, so we're moving up to Barcelona now. And now we've got things like the Dream Team. Now we've got things like, was that Michael Johnson in Barcelona? If I'm not mistaken?
I think so.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So now we have all of this other stuff going on, and we're looking at, all right, what do we have for boxing now? All right, well, we've got Oscar De La Hoya. And for the Americans, that's about it. Tim Austin and Chris Burt. Okay, not bad, but not great. But we've got, we're not winning everything now. What happened? Is it because the Cubans came back? Well, a little bit. Joel Casamayor wins at bantamweight. All right. But it's still what's going on here. But the story is, and has been known to be around Oscar De La Hoya, it's Oscar De La Hoya. So why was Oscar De La Hoya the story? Charles, what you have an impact or an idea of Oscar. Why was he the story? Just because there was nobody else that stepped up?
No, I wouldn't say that. He had a very likable story. He did. I mean, where he was from, his heritage. I mean, not to say that they never had anybody from a different kind of cultural background come up, but he had a great smile. We know that goes a long way. He had great heritage, and he was very proud of his heritage. And he had no problems with letting you know where it's from. He didn't disrespect anybody. Plus, too, which I think now we start to grow with the Olympics is you can have a guy that may have a different come from a different heritage or a different culture or background, and he's all about who he is, right, as far as his background. But he also loved being an American. That's one of the things that Oscar De La Hoya came across. He would maybe speak in Spanish to the fans and let them know how much he loved them, but he never did it out of disrespect for the greater good, if you will, as it was considered, as far as American fans. He was always like, yeah, I'm here, I'm the golden boy. There's a reason why they call him the golden boy. He sparkled. He was, he's kind of like Showtime. And not only that, he could box. He could really box, and he was impressive. So that's that feel-good story. Not saying he had to be perfect, but he was a guy that made you go, wow. He wowed you in the ring. Then he come out, and he's something to everybody. I'm talking to my folks from my heritage and my culture. Then I'm gonna give you something in America. And he had that smile, and he got to wave his flag because nobody was looking at him differently. But I think he was the golden boy, almost like the golden child of those Olympics, and people love that. And then as he moved forward in professional boxing, is he ready for the next challenge? And he always was. And I think that's what really propelled him to be who he was, because pretty much for all of the challenges, he stepped up, and he was a great story.
Yeah, and that's it. Now, when we're looking at the future now, John, and I know when we started this idea, we were kind of like, okay, we knew that you and I talked about, we knew that the future professionalism would kind of take precedent over what we see them as amateurs, or how we saw them as amateurs. And I get that, but did we have any idea that Oscar De La Hoya has become the conglomerate that he became? And how is there a springboard from the Olympics, or is that just kind of was destined to be that guy, or is he as important as maybe I'm overstating it?
It's all of the above. I mean, if you remember the Olympics, the boxing coverage was all about him. That's all you ever heard about. His mother, if I remember correctly, was dying, and so he dedicated it to his mother. He also had a huge female fanship, which of course can't hurt.
Can't hurt, right?
So there were people. There weren't just dudes watching it. There were a bunch of women watching the Olympics because they loved Oscar. He was so cute. And so, yeah, when he came out of the Olympics, he was already a company in a sense. He was like Sugar Ray. You know, his first fight, he made a bunch of money, just like Sugar Ray. I think I remember Sugar Ray made $40,000 in his first fight. It's like, whoa, his first fight.
Set for life, right? Yeah.
Right, and Oscar De La Hoya, similar kind of thing. Thing was, I wasn't totally sold on Oscar when I watched him in the Olympics. I thought he was good and everything, but I didn't think he was. Yeah, I didn't think he was a great fighter. I thought he was good. I thought he might have been overhyped a little. What impressed me was when he won his first title at the Olympic, he got knocked down, which shocked everybody, and he got up and he kicked the crap out of the guy. And I went, okay, he's for real. But, you know, there is things called hype jobs, so you have to kind of prove.
Right.
You know, like we got some guys now, not to say that, but just as a comparison, Frank, guys like Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney right now, you know they're good, but is there a little hype going on right now, especially with Ryan? You know, do we really know how good he is? So that was kind of how I looked at Oscar. And I don't know what fight that was that he did that. But I thought, okay, he's the real deal. And he turned out to obviously be incredibly popular. And he did fight everybody. He lost a few, but he fought everybody.
This is the first Olympics that, in my recollection, that the coverage was so great. Was this the first one with the triple cast and all that crap? I don't know. But there was so much hype to everything. Again, you've got the basketball dream team. You've got Michael Johnson in the golden shoes. You've got this, you've got that. There was so much media involved that it spilled over into this one guy in boxing. You're like, is anyone else fighting in this? You know, because every dream team game was being covered. So you only had enough time to cover that. Then you went, oh, we got track, and we got this, we got that, and we got the, swimming and diving. Oh, what? De La Hoya, we'll watch him. And we'll talk about him, and then we won't talk about anybody else. So coming out of that, like you said, I'm like, I'm not sure if he's that good. I'm not sure if he's, again, an amateur fighter who does what he does because those are the rules he's playing by. Will that transfer to being a pro? And I questioned that for some time, and as Charles will say, I was probably proven wrong. But he was never that guy that I went, man, he's going to be that guy until, you know, down the road when he got in a few wars and he proved that he could stay in a war and do okay. So, you know, this is where we're starting to see, I don't want to say, well, let's say this is now the decline of especially the American effect in Olympic boxing. But as we said there, De La Hoya is the one we focused on. No one else wins gold. Now we go to Atlanta, in our backyard. And who can forget Janet Evans handed the torch over to Muhammad Ali and all that, and it still makes me want to cry, all that. And you go, okay, with Muhammad Ali there and all that, our Olympic boxers have to be David Reed. Now, coming out of that, Floyd Mayweather Jr. gets a bronze. Antonio Tarver. Okay, but and Vladimir Klitschko comes out of Ukraine and wins. And Vasily Zhurov. Okay, two guys that kept their belts for quite some time. But, wow, that's it? That's all? And again, now, Charles, we know the story of Floyd Mayweather Jr. and Floyd Sr. and Roger and Jeff and all that. Coming out of the Olympics, we think Floyd Mayweather is going to be a badass.
Probably not, because I think that you saw him, and I think there might have been some concern about him being so light, and could he get it done with being at that size? Because we know he could punch and he was quick and he could move, but then he always seemed like he was gonna be a little dude, and we know what happens when you put a big guy against a little guy, and whether or not he was tough enough, but whether or not he could take that brawling and that punishment. So yeah, coming out, I think the questions were still out there. Question is, would he be able to transform those hands and all of everything that he was doing into a position where, in a real fight with some stronger guys, would he be up to the challenge, and would he be able to avoid getting caught? Because you know they like to do that when they put a big guy in there, he gets caught with a shot. It's like, okay, well, he was good, but he can't take a shot. So no, I don't think that the world knew what was coming from Floyd Mayweather. I think we're still a little skeptical. He was cool, he was cute, in regards to his style and way he moved, and could outbox you. But then you ask yourself too, because I think a lot of people were on the fence and really needed to see the fight from the Olympics, that if he was that great, then why didn't he win? And
right. Well,
that's what a lot of people think. Instead of going into the all of the intangibles involved with it and why he lost or whatever, or what really happened, they would say if he was going to be that great, he should have been dominant to make sure there was no question as to what the decision went, who the decision went to.
And you're looking at him, John, you're thinking, I don't think he can get to super featherweight, let alone to lightweight, let alone to welterweight and even above. There's no way. That frame looked like it was almost maxed out then. So does it prove that we just don't know what we're seeing sometimes, or that there is a big difference between 19, 20-year-old Floyd Mayweather Jr. and 26, 27-year-old Floyd Mayweather Jr.?
For him, yes. And sometimes it goes the other way. Sometimes a guy is really good at 20, and then when he's 26, he's done. Right. You know, Floyd just kept getting better and better. I don't even really remember him at all of the 96. I hate to say it, but I vaguely remember him. I remember David Reed because of his droopy eyelid.
Right.
I remember. What a thing to remember. The poor guy, he's a gold medalist, and that's what I remember, his droopy eyelid. Yeah. I mean, that's terrible. It just tells you, I don't even know if I can come up with what it says. It's just things changed so much. It's 20 years after Montreal. Boxing, by this point, maybe it wasn't as popular. It was for guys like me who obviously loved it, but I don't think I was impressed by the team as much. I forgot that Antonio Tarver and Floyd, like I said, won bronze. I forgot all about that. But you're right, Frank. Some guys they win like an Oscar. He obviously was quite good already when he won the gold, and he just got better. Floyd he needed to grow into his man body and everything, and he was kind of a cutie in those days, if I remember. And then as he figured out what he was, pretty boy Floyd and all that, and then he became money. But when he was a real big time action fighter later as a pro. But if I remember here, he was obviously a boxer, and he lost, but he didn't make much of an impression. So you really don't know. It's like it happens like that in sports. In every sport, you'll see a guy, a running back in football's first year, and you go, he's pretty good. And then second year, boom, he explodes.
He figured it out.
So some guys, baseball, that happens where he has an okay year, and then next year he hits 45 home runs, and you're like, where did that all come from? So some guys just mature, find themselves, and obviously with what Floyd Mayweather Jr. achieved after the Olympics, what happened there, nothing to do with what was coming for him.
Well, this is where we get to the point where, and we've asked this question amongst ourselves on the show and off the show, are the Olympics different? And I think, to me right now, this is why I'm doing this show and a series of other shows. When were the Olympics supposed to start this year? Does anybody recall? I mean, I know because I looked it up, but we know they've been postponed for a year. But when do they fall on the calendar? I mean, it used to be that was must-see TV. The Olympics are coming on in 2 weeks, and we got to make sure, and they're going to have the best boxing and the swimming and the basketball and the volleyball. And I know names from volleyball teams that I don't even know volleyball about. Karsh Karai, Steve Timmons, and all, because I have no idea. And with the boxing itself, we can go, we'll go to the Sydney Games and we'll say Ricardo Juarez is the only American to get a gold. Wow. The only name on that list that I can recall doing anything as a pro is Jermaine Taylor, who got a bronze. The rest are guys that are, amateur, or Guillermo Rigondeaux, Sultan Ibrahimov, those kind of guys. Okay, Europeans or Cubans or whomever, but even the guys that didn't win, that did win, didn't go on to have pro careers. It's like we went back from before we started talking about the Sydney Games. Olympic boxing is different than pro boxing now. And Olympic Games seems to be different. If you can go see the entire NHL play in the Olympics, but you can also see them play in the NHL, why are you watching the Olympics? It seems like it's a different animal now. And I don't want to get on a soapbox or anything about this, but it doesn't seem to be as important. And we go 20 years hence from the Sydney Games in 2000. What do we say? Andre Ward, and I forgot the other two that have medaled. Not just have Andre Durrell and who's the other one I mentioned? I can't remember now. The one that got a bronze. But it's so bad that it's that forgettable. 3 guys in the last 4 Olympics. That's not what you're used to. As Charles said, in '76 we had a springboard. Well, that springboard is collapsed now. So, Charles, is the Olympic Games, the Olympic boxing, as important as it used to be? At least we used to think it used to be.
In regards to the Olympic Games, I would say it still holds water because there's a lot of other sports out there that people want to see. I mean, you just want to see track and field. You want to see whatever the overall event you want to see because you're waiting for a new record to be broken or something to that effect. But in regards to Olympic boxing, no, I don't think it's the same. And I think that because of America was expected to have this run. I'm trying to think of the gentleman's name that was around. What was wasn't Shields, the gentleman that was like what everybody's White. Was it White? The boxing coach, last name White. Somebody that was supposed to come in and kind of change boxing and
I know you're talking about
uplift the Olympic team, and they were supposed to do it for a long time, but for some reason or another, it just did not translate. It didn't come through like we expected. We were expecting the great teams, and when you say guys, I think the other part that makes people, for me anyway, not sure how great if it's not living up to previous expectations. Well, you mentioned you have Floyd Mayweather Jr. and now we see what he's done in the past. The young Stevenson.
Stevenson, yes.
Yeah. So you're thinking if we have all this talent,
right?
Yeah. Why in the hell can't we have a dominant and top-notch Olympic team? So that kind of goes back to, is it coaching? Is it guys just saying, I don't want to do this? Is it not the right mindset? And I think that until we get back to the track where you go, I mean, David Reed was a hell of a fighter. I mean, I loved him. I didn't think he was going to be much of a pro because of his size and his style. And then, of course, the issue with his eyelid, I thought he was going to get cut too many times, which he did, which would be a disservice to him. But I think it really stemmed back to the program and what we were doing and not getting guys ready, because when we were ready and we were on the top, 76, 84, it's like, it doesn't matter. We're coming through here. Bang, bang, bang. Now it's like, what's wrong? What the hell? Why can't we get a solid team? It's kind of like, and I don't want to put an analogy to basketball or something like that real quick, but if you're a coach and everybody has the same attitude, even if you have a tougher fight and facing better talent than most, the attitude, the training, the all-for-one type of attitude, the demeanor that you have going in, you're like, we're a team. It's almost like running track. You have to make sure that you get your you get your points from your 100, 200, 400, and then your relay team has to come through to get those points. So it's almost like everybody's going for the same thing. And even though they're fighting individually, I think it starts at the top. And I think we, and myself and others, have been disappointed because we are expecting that next great team, and it hasn't shown up.
I think I see it, but John, you can clarify this for me. What is the proving ground? And we already said it from one point back in the early days where it was you needed to fight to get paid. So you didn't worry about amateur fights until, as soon as you realized you get paid, again, the term prize fighter came to mind. What's the proving ground now? Because if my take is right, it used to be Golden Gloves to Olympic, or at least Olympic trials, to Olympics, to then becoming a pro. Or at least, that was the stage. Are the Golden Gloves that important now?
No, not really. And I was just sitting here thinking while Charles was talking, when was the last time you heard a young fighter, really young, say, my goal is to win the gold? You used to hear that. You used to hear back in the day, you'd read, okay, this guy, he wants a gold medal. I remember reading in Ring magazine before the '84 Olympics that all of those guys, that was their goal. Meldrick, Taylor, Purnell, they wanted the gold. That was what they were shooting for. They wanted it since they were a kid. Moving forward, Andre Ward, that was his first goal, was to win the gold. You don't hear these guys, and it was a bigger deal in those days, and it's not. In the television, the way they televise it now is different. They don't focus on it like they did. They show it at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, so it's obviously way down on the importance. And the coaching. There was a coach, I can't think of his name. I think they called him Pops or whatever. That was the coach of the Olympic team, and everybody loved him. And he was old already, and so he couldn't do it forever. And then what Charles was alluding to, I think, is that I don't remember the name of the coach either, but Freddie Roach got involved with the Olympic teams to try to bring it back.
Yeah.
But if the kids aren't motivated to do it, and they already smell the green, because the Olympic gold isn't that huge. Because back those days, that was what it was. It was a springboard, Frank and Charles. I'm sure that you win the gold, you're going to make a lot of money in your first fight, and you're guaranteed to make quite a bit of money. Even if it turns out your pro career isn't very good, you should make more money than if you were just some guy who had an amateur career. It did help. Now, with everything is so different. Promoters sign guys like Gabriel Flores Jr. He signs him when he's 17. And he thought about the Olympics. I remember I talked to him. He thought about it, but then there's all this money, so you can't blame him. So I think it's a combination of everything. I think there's still talent out there that could win gold for America, but the motivation, the focus, the coaching is not the same. So what happens? We don't win any gold.
And not to end this on a down note, because if we look at the Olympics and Olympic boxing in the last 20 years, it is going to be a down note. But I think it's like talking about the golden age of, sport and Bill Tilden and whatever back in the 20s, the other 20s, not this 20s. I hadn't thought about that. But we're looking back at it saying, okay, there was a time when, and I don't know if we see that now unless you're as old as we are. There was a time when the Olympics were on and we had guys who go, wow, just wow. And then to follow who they become, and you can say what you want about the guys behind you, the Cassius Clay, and what he became and how he did it and how he changed him, all that. But he was a household name at that point. Even though most people didn't think he could beat Sonny Liston, you still knew who the guy was, You throw in the Joe Frazier and the George Foremans the next couple of years, go, okay, I get it. I see what's going on. Sugar Ray Seals. Now, I know who Sugar Ray Seals is, but again, you've got that build-up to that 76 team. You go, wow, this is cool. And then the 84 team, and then De La Hoya and Roy. There was something that was to be, I don't know if cherished is the right word, but something to be put on a spotlight and go, yeah, this was cool. So I'm glad we talked about this. I had to think about a couple of things I hadn't thought about before, and again, that's the focus of the show, is to get people to go, oh yeah, pretty cool. So, any last words, gentlemen? John, combine your names together at the same time.
Well, it's hard not to be on a downer, because it is kind of sad. Because being an old guy like me, I relished the 76 and 84 teams, especially 76. That was such an exciting team. And nothing is like that anymore. It's not even close. It was kind of fun with Oscar, but that was because they, like I said, they hyped him up through the yazoo, so you couldn't help it. It was everywhere was Oscar with a smile, but there was a lot more depth in 76 and 84. It wasn't about one guy. It was about these incredible teams and these incredible talents. So it was just fun, and I miss those days. I do. But boxing, of course, isn't the same as it was then in the pro ranks either. So I guess maybe that's just the way it's evolved into what it is now. It's sad, but that was a glorious time. I mean, think about it. In 76, that was in the 70s that we talked about on the show numerous times, the heavyweights with Quarry and Foreman and Ali and Frazier and all those, Ron Lyle and all those fighters, that were around then. And it was just a totally different time.
Charles? Yeah,
it is sad because I enjoy a good boxer. I enjoy a good technician, which is why I'm huge on Shakur Stevenson. I mean, what he's done, what he's able to do, and he seems so comfortable and command his presence. You know, way he's
right.
he goes about his business and seems to be in control. And you would hope that we have that type of talent coming in for the Olympics, but for some reason or another, young men are doing other things. They're, you know, maybe some of the great heavyweights are playing tight end now, or something to that effect. But just that fact, but not having that talent come through, and if it does come through, not seeing it evolve into those champions that we loved. And maybe we had as John said, we called a glimpse of greatness. And at that time, it was very special, and it may never ever be the same. That lets you know you're getting old. When you still on them. I remember back in 1947 when that boy knocked Joe Louis out. I mean, we know we used to laugh. I used to laugh at them old men holding on to old stuff, and now I'm like, damn, I'm that old man.
We're doing it. We're doing it too.
Yeah, so
it's like that was filmed in black and white. You listen to that on the radio, you old fart.
Yeah. So, with that being said, I think that's where I'm kind of at, and I'll just have to accept it. But I do think it's sad that we don't have that, and I'm still holding a little small glimmer of hope that maybe one day we'll get a team that can stand on their own and revitalizes America as a solid boxing entity, the boxing team once again.
Well, I miss being able to chant, other than political rallies and crap that I don't care about, USA, USA, USA. I miss that. I miss that thing that, I'm caught up in this moment right here, and it's because of those young men and women performing on the stage representing me. Representing us. I think that's pretty cool. And I don't see that now. And I'm not sure that's a whole Olympic movement. I don't know. That's something for another person to say. But in the boxing realm, I don't see that that's the focus, I guess. And maybe it's not for everybody. Maybe it never was. I don't know. But it doesn't seem like it's the same. And let's see if we can, find another way to make it positive, because we, like I said, we edited on, oh my God. But let's see if we make it positive. So, all right, on a brighter note, folks, the Ultimate Sports Network and Real Boxing Talk are starting their own television stations, internet television. It should be up and running here in another week or two, maybe at the end of the month, where we're working out all the bugs. So you'll be able to see what we do on a daily basis, 24/7. Just tune in and pick it up where it starts instead of having to worry about, oh, is this? It's going to run. So previous shows we've done, newest shows we're going to put on. Also going to have a Roku channel as well as YouTube and all the other fun stuff. So we're adding more and more ways you can find us. For the 5 of you that are watching this now, you can find us in different places. We're doing stuff. So we're making it work out for you. Anyone has any suggestions, please contact Ultimate Sport Network at contact@ultimatesportsnetworks, pretty easy to do.com. Let us know what you think. Comments in YouTube and wherever else you're finding this, let us know what's going on. We're going to make it better for you. So thank you once again, gentlemen. I think we're mining some more stuff. And let us know the next fight you want us to cover, the next greatest fight you want us to cover, because that's probably the next thing we have to consider. So I think we're doing good, and we're just going to keep on moving.